Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Thank you for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to be walking you through how to make a tiny cross-stitch goose. So I recently posted this on my Instagram, so I'll insert a clip of it right here. And I actually really like how the final product turned out. I think it's really cute and I really like the colors that I chose. And it also only took me an afternoon to finish, so I was able to finish this in one sitting. And I think that this video is a great place to start if you're new to cross stitch, because we're going to be starting from the very beginning and going through everything. We're going to be talking about what materials you need, how to set up your embroidery hoop, how to thread your needle, how to actually make a cross stitch, and also how to follow a pattern so that no matter what pattern you have after this, you'll be able to complete it. Truthfully, once you've done it once, you'll see that it's really quite simple and pretty easy, and you'll probably be able to follow millions of other patterns online without having to relearn anything. But if you do need to relearn it, you can always come back to this video to watch and see how we set everything up so that you can keep stitching. So without further ado, let's head back in time when it was a little bit lighter outside and watch me complete this cross-stitch goose. So the first thing that you'll need is an embroidery hoop. I used a 6-inch hoop because I wanted to leave extra space for more designs, but if you only want to do this one pattern, then I would recommend using a 2 to 3-inch hoop so that it fits well. You'll also need some thread. I used DMC thread, and the exact numbers that I used were 3855, 3687, 310, 369, 3743, 157, 778, 822, and 3863. Next is an embroidery needle. I typically use sizes 7 to 10, but really you're just looking for a needle that has a big enough eye to easily fit your thread through, but not so big that you leave a giant hole every time you go through the fabric. You'll also need a pair of scissors. I actually use a pair of cosmetic scissors since they're small and sharp, but any pair will be fine. And the last thing that you need is fabric. I use Ida cloth, which has a grid-like pattern to it, and you have to pay attention to the count of your cloth. So I'm going to be using 18 count fabric, which means that there will be 18 stitches per inch. Now let's push all of this aside and hoop our fabric. The first thing that you need to do is unscrew the metal piece at the top and separate the two rings. Then you can place your fabric over the inner hoop and place the outer hoop over your fabric. Tighten the screw at the top to keep your fabric in place and make sure that the grid lines are centered. I want the screw to be directly at the top of my work, so I'm going to call that my center. On the back of my hoop, I marked how big my design was going to be, so that I could visualize where exactly it would end up. This is really important if you want your design to be centered. The width is 25 stitches, so I counted 25 squares and marked it, and then I did the same thing with the height. I'm always a little messy when I'm planning this out, but it's on the back of the fabric and no one's going to see it. The next step is threading our needles so that we can start stitching. I took my first color, which was 822, and unraveled around 18 to 20 inches of thread. Each skein of thread has 6 strands in it, so I grabbed one strand from the skein and separated it. For this pattern, I want 2 strands of thread in each stitch. So I took my one strand, threaded it through my needle, and then aligned the ends. By folding it over like this, you'll get 2 strands per stitch. For the rest of this video, I'm going to be using my embroidery hoop stand to hold my work, but you don't need this to complete your project. I'm going to flip my work to the back side so that I can see where I drew my guidelines in, and in the top right corner of the video I have a diagram of the pattern which will mimic exactly what I'm doing in the video. If you would like, you can download the completed pattern for free on my shop. The link is in the description. The pattern has a recap of everything that we've done so far, along with the finished pattern and a stitch counter if you would like to keep track of your progress. If you're interested, I would suggest pausing the video to download that free pattern now, but otherwise, I'm going to move on. So the first stitch is on the second row and is in the third column from the left. So on my fabric, I'm going to go to row 2 and count 3 from the right, because my work is flipped upside down right now. I then brought my needle through the bottom right corner of the square that I want to fill in. I then came back through the fabric on the corner that is diagonal from where I started. After that, I came up on the top right corner of the square, and then down on the bottom left. If this is difficult for you to imagine right now, that's okay. Take a minute to figure out where exactly your first square is that you need to fill in, and then make your first 2 diagonal stitches. Figuring out where to start is the most difficult part. Now when I flip over my hoop, I will have a tiny tan cross stitch in the top left corner of my grid. In the square directly next to the one that you just filled in, come up in the bottom right corner and then down in the top left. When you come down, it will overlap with the corners of your previous cross stitch. I then came up in the top right corner of the square and then down in the bottom left, again overlapping the corners. If you look at the pattern, my first row has 3 squares in it, so I will do 3 squares next to each other. After finishing this row, I moved on to the next row to fill in those squares. As I fill in the next row, I want to mention something that can help with the look of your finished cross stitch pattern, and that is to be consistent with which stitch is on the bottom or the top of your cross. So if you're going from left to right first, then that stitch will be on the bottom. Then you should always have the stitch that goes from right to left on top. It can be difficult to remember, and it's okay if you don't do this. The pattern will still look great, and even I messed up a few times in this video, but your pattern will look a little bit smoother if you keep it consistent. So you can see as I finish up this second row that I use the grid pattern of the fabric to define my squares, and each cross stitch takes up 1 square. So you can read cross stitch patterns by having each grid box as a square of your fabric, and you fill in with the color that the pattern tells you. It's a lot like a paint by number in that way, and can be really relaxing once you get a feel for how the needle and thread is in your hands. I'm now going to skip through to row 8 because that's where my thread was becoming really short and I was no longer able to continue stitching. So when this happens to you, what you can do is bring the needle down one last time so that it is on the back, and then flip your work over. And what I'm going to do is place my needle under the previous stitches and pull it through without fully going through the fabric. I wish you could see it better here, but my hand was in the way, but you can see what it looks like after I ran the needle under the stitches. Now it's secured on the back and I can cut the thread. After that, you can restart with a new strand of thread just as we did before, and you can keep stitching indefinitely. When I flipped my work over again, I counted where I left off and I continued with this base color that I'm going to speed through really quickly, and you can watch as the pattern in the corner grows row by row. While this goes, I want to talk about my future plans for this channel. I definitely want to continue posting more crafting tutorial videos, including more free miniature cross-stitch patterns. I want to fill this entire hoop with more cross-stitch animals, but other than that, I typically see myself as more of an embroidery artist rather than a cross-stitcher, because that's where I started as an artist. I currently have a 25 beginner embroidery stitches pattern and kit available on my shop, and I'm in the middle of working on making a longer YouTube tutorial to be paired with that. I also have been making crochet headbands for my shop and would love to make a tutorial on how I make one of those as well, in case you would rather make one in a kit rather than purchase a finished product. Currently, I plan on sticking with only cross-stitch, embroidery, and crochet tutorial videos for this channel, as that's what I'm comfortable with right now, but on Instagram I show more of what my day-to-day life is and documenting my growth as an artist and just as a person. So if you're interested in free crafting patterns and following along on my journey, please consider subscribing or following me on Instagram. It looks like I'm almost done with the base color of the pattern here, so let's get back to the tutorial. The next color is 3863 for some shading that goes underneath the goose. And instead of going in rows, I made my way around the body of the goose from left to right. You can see that I started to lose daylight here, so I'm sorry for the lighting change, but I do still appreciate the cozy atmosphere that this has now. The next color is the yellow for the beak and the feet of the goose. So you need to do a few small stitches for both of these things and then put the yellow aside to be used later for the flowers. The next color is the black color, 310, and this is used for only a single stitch, which is the eye, which is a very satisfying stitch to make as it starts to give your project some life. The next color is 3687 to give the goose a tiny bonnet around its head. You'll notice that there are lots of empty squares in the bonnet, so pay close attention to the squares that you need to skip. In those empty spaces, go back with the lighter pink to give it a polka dot look. And this is the end of the actual cross stitching of the mother goose, but we aren't done yet. We're going to use some embroidery techniques to add some extra detail to the goose to give it a small wing. For this technique, we will not be using 2 strands of thread in each stitch. We're only going to be using 1. So this can be a little tricky because you will not be aligning the ends of your thread to fold it over and create 2. Instead, you're going to have a long end and a short end, and you need to continuously pinch the short end so that it doesn't become loose. This can be tricky to get used to, but don't worry, even if you accidentally let go of the thread, it's really easy to re-thread the needle and continue working. On the pattern, I have a brown line drawn over one side of a square. You can come up in the left corner of the square and then down in the right corner to make a straight stitch, not a diagonal one. You need to make sure to hold on to that loose end and to leave a long tail on the back so that you don't pull the thread all the way through. It can be a lot to coordinate, so try to go slow. You can continue working down the line of straight stitches, following the pattern. If you're worried about the long thread in the back coming loose, then you could try and fasten the loose thread under your new stitches that you're creating. You can finish up the pattern with some small cross-stitch flowers on either side of the goose. I used the same yellow color that we used for the beak and the feet, and then I used a purple color and a blue color for the petals. And then I added 2 small green X's to represent some grass or some leaves underneath. Now our goose is all finished. If you would like to share your finished work with me, please do. As of right now, it is my first week launching my shop and my social media accounts, so I have yet to see anyone recreate my work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.